They say when your heart breaks, it doesn't happen all at once. It cracks slowly, then shatters in an instant. For me, that instant came at 6:47 a.m. on a cold Tuesday morning. I'd just gotten off my overnight shift at their 12 hours of back-to-back trauma cases, a screaming toddler with a dislocated shoulder, and a man who didn't make it out of surgery. My bones ached, my eyes were burning, and all I wanted was to come home, take off my scrubs, crawl into bed, and feel my husband's arms around me. But the house was quiet.
Too quiet.
At first, I didn't think anything of it. My husband, Mark, worked in real estate. He often left early for showings. But something felt off. I could feel it in the air, the absence. Like walking into a museum after hours. Everything was still in place, yet lifeless. I set my keys on the kitchen counter and called out, "Mark?" Silence. I walked into the bedroom and froze. His side of the closet? Empty. Gone were his suits, his shoes, his gym bag. The framed photo of us at the Grand Canyon, our first anniversary, was no longer on the dresser. On the counter where my keys now sat was a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it with trembling hands. "Aubrey, I can't do this anymore. I'm not happy. You're not the same woman I married. You've changed. I need more out of life. I've moved out. Don't wait for me." That was it. No explanation. No conversation. No goodbye. I stood there, the note shaking in my hand. For a long moment, I couldn't even cry. My brain couldn't catch up with what my eyes were seeing. I walked through the house like a ghost. The coffee pot still had his morning brew in it. One of his colognes was forgotten on the bathroom sink. There was even a single sock, one of those silly pineapple ones I bought him as a joke, on the laundry room floor. It felt like I'd woken up in someone else's nightmare. The tears came that night, hard and heavy. I curled up in the middle of our bed and sobbed until my throat was raw. My mind kept racing with questions. What did I do wrong? Was I not enough? Had he been planning this? The next few weeks were a blur. He didn't return my calls. He ignored my texts. The only thing I received was a thick envelope from a lawyer, divorce papers.
Just like that.
Mark and I had been together since college. I'd supported him through failed business ventures, late nights building his career, even helped pay the bills when real estate slowed down. I gave him everything I had, emotionally, physically, financially. He knew about my fertility issues. He knew how I'd buried my father last year, how I was still barely standing from that loss. He knew, and he left anyway. I remember sitting at my mom's kitchen table one Sunday, unable to touch the food in front of me, my eyes swollen from crying the night before. She reached across the table, took my hand, and said gently, "He didn't leave because you weren't enough, Aubrey. He left because he never knew how to love someone fully." But those words didn't comfort me right away. Because somewhere deep inside, I believed what Mark had told me during our last phone call. You've let yourself go. You used to be fun. You used to be sexy. Now you're just tired all the time, working yourself to death. It's like living with a roommate. I can still hear the coldness in his voice. He blamed me for becoming exhausted after caring for patients around the clock, managing our home, and trying to plan for the family we'd never have. He made it sound like my dedication and sacrifice had become unattractive. And then, 2 weeks later, I saw it. A photo on Instagram. Mark, grinning, with his arm around a blonde in a bikini, sipping cocktails on a boat. Caption: New chapter. New energy. New life. I stared at the screen for nearly 5 minutes before I could breathe again. That's when the rage kicked in. New energy? New life? I gave him my energy, my youth, my everything. I wasn't just grieving a man. I was grieving the future we planned. The house we were supposed to grow old in. The nursery I never got to decorate. The quiet Sunday mornings, the anniversary trips, the children we talked about but never had.
Gone.
And yet, somehow, I was the one who felt like a failure. Friends told me to go out, get even, post a revenge photo. But that's not who I was. I couldn't fake happiness. I couldn't pretend I was okay. So I withdrew. I worked longer shifts at the hospital, volunteered on holidays, avoided baby showers and engagement parties. Every smile felt forced. Every compliment felt like a lie. In the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. There were nights I'd stand in the shower and cry silently, letting the water mask the sobs. I'd fall asleep clutching a pillow, hoping to wake up and find that everything had just been a bad dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was my life. I didn't know it at the time, but I was grieving more than a marriage. I was grieving the version of myself that believed love meant forever. The girl who thought loyalty would be enough. The woman who never thought she'd be 34 and alone. And yet, even in that darkest place, a voice inside whispered, "This isn't how your story ends." I didn't believe it. Not yet. But it was a seed. One that would take time to grow. Time and a man I hadn't met yet. They never tell you that healing doesn't look like a sunrise. It looks like dragging yourself out of bed after 4 hours of sleep, making coffee you won't drink, and forcing yourself to brush your teeth even though your mouth tastes like defeat. There were no inspirational quotes taped to my mirror. No miracle workouts. No glow-up montage with Beyoncé playing in the background. There was just me and the quiet. Grief, I learned, isn't loud. It's not the wailing you do the day he leaves. It's the silence that follows. The kind that sits next to you at dinner. The kind that makes you flinch when you hear his laugh in a crowded room, even though it's never him. For months, I moved through life in autopilot. Get up, work, sleep, repeat. I smiled at patients, nodded at coworkers, and collapsed on the couch the second I got home. I deleted Instagram. I ghosted my friends. I turned down every party, every happy hour, every blind date. I told people I was fine. I wasn't. I was angry, but not the screaming kind of angry. It was the quiet kind, the kind that simmers beneath your skin. I was angry that I gave so much of myself to someone who didn't even flinch when he walked away. I blamed myself for everything. My body for not giving us children, my schedule for being too demanding, my heart for loving him so blindly. Until one night, something changed. I was working the night shift again, burnout level 10, and I found myself comforting a woman in her 70s who had just lost her husband of 50 years. She gripped my hand and said, through tears, "We were so lucky. Not perfect, but lucky. Love is hard work, you know?" That hit me harder than I expected, because I realized I did the hard work. I showed up. I loved with everything I had. I wasn't the failure. I was the survivor. That night, I went home and made a list. A list of things I had stopped doing because I was too busy being Mark's wife. Too busy fixing, pleasing, chasing. Read fiction. Take a dance class. Visit the coast. Call friends back. Laugh without guilt. Go on one solo date. I didn't do them all at once. I didn't even do most of them for months. But I kept the list taped inside a journal. And slowly, I began crossing things off. First, I said yes to my coworker Nora, who invited me to her sister's book club. It wasn't glamorous, just 6 women drinking cheap wine and screaming about plot twists, but it felt safe. It felt good to be somewhere where no one looked at me with pity. Then I got a library card. It felt small and silly, but checking out books with my name on the little paper slip made me feel like a person again. I started going to the farmer's market on Sundays. Alone. I wore sunglasses and pretended I was someone mysterious and interesting. Sometimes I'd catch couples laughing, kids eating sticky peaches, and it would sting, but the sting got duller with time. And somewhere along the way, I began to remember who I was before him. I remembered that I used to write short stories. That I loved Motown. That I once danced in the rain in Nashville just because it felt like something a movie version of me would do. I still wore scrubs 5 nights a week, still got stuck behind ambulances, still had patients curse at me during their withdrawal episodes, but I started to feel present again.
Alive.
And then came Dylan. I wasn't looking. Honestly, I was still half scared of men. Of commitment. Of repeating my past. But Dylan wasn't like Mark. Not even close. We met at my niece's school fundraiser. I was manning the raffle table, annoyed that my sister had roped me into another family thing. Dylan was running late, his 6-year-old daughter Ava clinging to his side with chocolate frosting on her face. He apologized for being a chaotic mess, made a dad joke about rigging the raffle for candy, and moved on. I didn't think much of it. Until a week later, when I ran into him again, this time at the grocery store, holding a bouquet of squash tulips and a frozen pizza.
He remembered me.
Smiled like we were old friends. "Hey, Raffle Queen," he said. "Still giving out prizes?" I laughed for the first time in what felt like months. We started chatting. First in small bursts. A text here. A coffee there. Then longer conversations.
Deep talks.
The kind of honesty I didn't know I'd missed. Dylan wasn't flashy. He wasn't poetic. But he was consistent. He showed up. Asked questions. Listened. He never made me feel like I was too much or not enough. He didn't care about my stretch marks or my long shifts or the scars I carried from my marriage. He told me I looked beautiful when I wore sweatpants and cried watching dog rescue videos. But I still hesitated. When he held my hand in public, I'd flinch. When he said, "I really like you," I'd nod but stay quiet. Because part of me was still broken. Still afraid. One night, after a long dinner at his place, Ava asleep on the couch, candles flickering in the kitchen, he looked at me and said gently, "You don't have to convince me you're worthy of love, Aubrey. You just are. I see it. I hope one day you do too." That broke me, in the best way. I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I finally realized Mark had lied. He said no one would want someone like me. But here was this man, seeing the most vulnerable, raw version of me, and choosing her. Every day. And slowly, I began choosing her too. The night Dylan proposed, I wasn't wearing makeup. My hair was in a messy bun, my sweatshirt had a coffee stain from that morning, and I was arguing with him over what toppings to get on our pizza. I was laughing so hard I snorted. And that's when he did it. Right there, sitting cross-legged on his living room floor, with Ava curled up beside us in unicorn pajamas and the smell of pepperoni lingering in the air, Dylan pulled a small, navy blue box from under the couch cushion and said, "Aubrey Taylor, I don't want a perfect life. I want a real one with you." I blinked, mouth open. "Are you joking?" He smiled. "Do I look like a man who jokes about commitment?" The ring wasn't flashy. It wasn't something out of a magazine. It was simple, elegant, and completely me. He'd picked it with Ava, who apparently insisted I deserved sparkles, but not too many. I said yes through tears and pizza breath, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't dared to feel in a long time.
Peace.
It wasn't just the ring. It wasn't the proposal. It was the knowledge that I had found a partner who saw my soul and didn't flinch. A man who met me after my heartbreak and still wanted the whole picture.
I didn't post the photo that night.
Not because I was hiding it, but because it felt sacred.
Ours.
But a few days later, I was sitting on my porch, sipping coffee in the morning light, the ring catching the sun, and I thought, no, I'm not hiding anymore. Not from judgment. Not from my past. Not from Mark. So I snapped a photo. Just my hand, resting on a book. No dramatic caption. Just 6 simple words. Turns out I did move on. I didn't even tag Dylan. I posted it and put my phone down. Went for a walk. Bought lemons I didn't need. Came home and forgot all about it until my phone exploded. Text after text. Instagram DMs from people I hadn't heard from in years. Screenshots.
Comments.
"Girl, is this for real? You're engaged? Tell me everything." And then,
I saw it.
a DM request from him.
Mark.
3 years. Not a single word. And now this? I clicked it. The message was short. So short it chilled me. "Congrats. I didn't think you'd move on this fast. Guess I was wrong." Fast? I stared at those words for a long time, rage and disbelief swirling in my chest. Fast? Was 3 years of rebuilding my life, surviving heartbreak, relearning how to breathe fast? This man left me like an unpaid bill on a kitchen counter, and now he had the audacity to act like I'd done something wrong? I didn't reply. But I did scroll through his profile, out of curiosity. And there it was, his new life. Shirtless hiking pics. Manifestation quotes. A new girlfriend, half my age, with a caption under their Valentine's Day photo. She healed me. Healed him? No, I was the one who healed, after he cracked me open and walked away. Still, the message shook something loose in me. Not pain. Not sadness. Closure. For so long, I'd been waiting for a moment. A sign that I'd won. That I'd beaten the story he wrote for me. And now it was here. Not because I had a ring on my finger. Not because people commented, "You deserve this." Not even because Mark saw it. But because I realized his opinion didn't matter anymore. He could think whatever he wanted. That I moved on too fast. That I wasn't fun. That I was too tired or too serious. He was wrong. I wasn't too much. I wasn't not enough. I was never the problem. I was just too powerful for a man who didn't want to grow. The photo ended up going semi-viral, shared by some self-love accounts, commented on by strangers. One woman wrote, "This gives me hope." Another, "Been crying in bed after my breakup, and this made me sit up. Thank you." That meant more to me than anything. Because if my pain could become someone else's reminder to keep going, then maybe it had a purpose after all. That weekend, I ran into Mark. In person. I was at a wedding expo with my sister, just browsing, not even serious yet. He was there with his girlfriend, who clung to his arm like she was afraid I might steal him back. He looked older, thinner, a little bitter, like life had worn him out, but he was still trying to smile through it. "Hey, Aubrey," he said, nodding. I met his eyes.
Cool. Calm.
Unbothered. "Hey, Mark." There was a pause. A silence pregnant with the ghosts of everything we'd once been. And then I smiled, truly smiled, and said, "I'm really happy now. I hope you are too." I meant it. He blinked, nodded, and turned away. That was it. No dramatic confrontation. No yelling in the aisles of a convention center. Just two people who once loved each other, now strangers, with very different endings. That night, I climbed into bed beside Dylan. He pulled me close and whispered, "You good?" I looked at the ring on my finger, the life I was building, the woman I'd become. And I said, "Yeah, I really am." Closure isn't always loud. Sometimes, it arrives in the quietest moments, like waking up next to someone who makes coffee for you without asking. Or folding your laundry in peace. Or catching your own reflection in the mirror and smiling, not because you look perfect, but because you look free. Mark used to say I was too emotional, that I held on to things too long, that I needed to get over it. And for a while, I believed him. I really did. But standing at the edge of the cliffs in Mendocino with the Pacific wind in my hair and Dylan holding my hand, I realized what Mark called emotional, the rest of the world calls strong. We were there for a long weekend, a pre-wedding getaway. No matching shirts, no itinerary, just us, breathing in the kind of air that felt like it could blow the past right off your skin. I wasn't the same woman who begged Mark to stay. I wasn't even the same woman who posted her ring online out of quiet revenge. I was something more now.
Whole.
Rooted. Radiant. Our wedding was small. We chose a cozy garden tucked behind a bookstore in Northern California, surrounded by wildflowers, mismatched chairs, and the people who stayed when my world fell apart. There were no seating charts. No choreographed dances. Just love. Real, messy, imperfect love. Ava was our flower girl. She threw petals like she was starting a revolution, then immediately tripped and face-planted. I laughed so hard I cried. Dylan helped her up and high-fived her like she'd just scored a touchdown. That's the kind of man he is. We didn't write vows to impress. We spoke from the heart. "I promise to honor who you were, who you are, and who you're still becoming," he said. And I said, "I promise never to shrink myself again. Not for you. Not for anyone." We kissed to the sound of wind chimes and clapping, and someone's uncle popping open a cheap bottle of sparkling cider. And just like that, I had the ending I never knew I needed. 2 weeks later, I got the email. Subject line, "Request for interview. Viral engagement story." Apparently, a women's media outlet had picked up my photo and traced it back to me. They wanted to feature the story. Nurse finds love again after divorce and goes viral. At first, I hesitated. I'm not a spotlight kind of woman. But I kept thinking about the messages, those quiet DMs from women who were still in the thick of it, still picking up the pieces, still crying into wine glasses and Googling therapists in their zip code. So I said yes. The article went live 3 days later, and the headline read, "He said she'd never move on. Now she's married to the love of her life." It got thousands of shares. I didn't care about the views. I cared about the comments. This is the first time I've felt hope since my divorce. My ex told me the same thing. I'm going to prove him wrong too. Just bought myself flowers and signed up for that pottery class. Let's go. I didn't post the article on my feed, but someone else did. My cousin, who still followed Mark, tagged me. Within minutes, I got a message. From him. "Guess I was wrong about you. Good for you. You seem really happy." There was no malice in it. No sarcasm. Just emptiness. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't need validation from the person who once tried to crush me. I closed the message, muted the conversation, and turned my phone off. That night, I told Dylan the whole story from the moment I met Mark to the worst days of my divorce, to the day I posted that photo. I told him how I once believed I'd be alone forever. How I thought I was ruined. Used. Unlovable. He listened without interrupting, then kissed the top of my head and whispered, "He left you broken so I could meet you healing. And that's the most beautiful part of you." We sat in silence for a long time. No TV. No noise. Just the two of us and the sound of Ava laughing in her room as she read to her stuffed animals. And in that quiet, I realized, this isn't a revenge story. It's a rebirth. I didn't win because I got a ring. I didn't win because the post went viral. I won because I chose me, every messy, glorious, battle-worn part of me, and built a life that didn't revolve around anyone else's opinion. I let go of the woman who kept receipts of every insult, who obsessed over whether he saw my photos or regretted leaving. That woman survived for a reason. But this woman? This woman thrives. Epilogue. I still get messages sometimes. Women who say they've been Aubrey too. Women who say they found their Dylan, or that they're still waiting but they believe now that he exists. And I tell every one of them the same thing. Don't rebuild your life to prove them wrong. Rebuild it to prove yourself right. You're not hard to love. They were just not the ones meant to hold you. Let him watch your joy from a distance he created. Let him scroll through the life he said you'd never have. Let him sit in silence while you laugh, grow, and dance under the sky you were always meant to shine in. Because in the end, the best revenge isn't rage. It's radiance. And girl, you've got plenty of that left in you.